Maya walked through the tall glass doors of Riverside University, her backpack heavy with music books and her heart even heavier with uncertainty. The marble floors echoed with her footsteps as she made her way to the music department, trying to ignore the butterflies dancing in her stomach. This was supposed to be a fresh start, but starting over at 22 felt harder than she had imagined. The music building buzzed with energy. Students hurried past her carrying instrument cases, their conversations filled with excitement about upcoming performances and auditions. Maya pulled her jacket tighter around herself, watching these confident musicians with a mixture of admiration and something she couldn't quite name. 6 months ago, she would have been one of them, discussing her latest concert or upcoming recording session. Now, she was just another transfer student trying to blend in. She found classroom 204 just as the clock struck 9. The door was slightly open, and she could hear Professor Williams calling out attendance. Maya took a deep breath and slipped inside, choosing a seat in the back corner where she hoped to remain invisible. The classroom was smaller than she expected, with about 20 students scattered across tiered seating. A grand piano sat in the center, its black surface gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Professor Williams was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and silver hair that looked like he had been running his fingers through it. He wore a worn tweed jacket and moved with the easy confidence of someone who had been teaching for decades. As he continued with attendance, Maya noticed how he seemed to know each student personally, asking about their weekend performances or family visits. "And we have a new student joining us today," Professor Williams announced, his gaze finding Maya in the back row. "Would you like to introduce yourself?" Maya felt 20 pairs of eyes turned toward her. Her cheeks warmed as she stood up slightly. "I'm Maya Chun. I just transferred here from California." "Welcome, Maya. We're always happy to have new talent join our program." Professor Williams smiled warmly. "What's your primary instrument?" "Piano," Maya replied quietly, sitting back down as quickly as possible. "Excellent. We can always use more pianists. Don't worry about catching up with the coursework. We'll help you get settled." Maya nodded, grateful when the attention shifted away from her. She pulled out her notebook and began taking notes as Professor Williams launched into a discussion about harmonic progressions. The material was basic music theory, concepts she had learned years ago, but she wrote everything down anyway. It felt good to be a student again, even if the work felt elementary. Around her, other students scribbled notes frantically. The girl, sitting 2 seats over, kept raising her hand to ask questions about chord structures that Maya could have answered in her sleep. A boy in the front row struggled with identifying intervals, something Maya had mastered before her 10th birthday. But she remained quiet, letting others participate while she observed. During the break, Maya stepped outside for some fresh air. The campus was beautiful, with old brick buildings surrounded by mature oak trees. Students sat on benches, eating lunch and chatting with friends. She watched a group of music students practicing on the lawn, their voices harmonizing as they worked through what sounded like a challenging piece. "The theory class can be pretty overwhelming at first," a voice said behind her. Maya turned to see a tall girl with curly red hair and a friendly smile. She was holding a violin case and looked to be about Maya's age. "I'm Lisa," the girl said. "I saw you in class." "You're the transfer student, right?" "Yes, Maya. Nice to meet you." "Where did you transfer from?" Professor Williams mentioned California. Maya hesitated. The truth was complicated. She had been studying at a prestigious conservatory in Los Angeles, but that felt like a different lifetime now. "Just a small school near San Francisco, nothing special." "Well, you'll love it here. The program is really good and Professor Williams is amazing. He's tough but fair." "Are you planning to audition for any of the performance groups?" "I'm not sure yet. I'm still getting settled." Lisa nodded understandingly. "That makes sense. There's no rush. The semester just started, so you have plenty of time to figure things out." "Are you living on campus?" "Yes, in the graduate dorms." "Oh, you're a grad student? That's cool. Most of us in the theory class are undergrads. What's your focus?" Maya felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came whenever someone asked about her plans. The truth was, she didn't know what her focus was anymore. 6 months ago, she had been a rising star in the classical music world, with a recording contract and a schedule full of performances. Then everything had fallen apart, and she had spent months trying to figure out who she was without the constant pressure of competition and perfection. "I'm still exploring my options," Maya said carefully. "I want to take some time to really think about what direction I want to go." "That's smart. There's so much pressure to specialize these days, it's nice to have the freedom to explore." When they returned to class, Professor Williams was setting up for the practical portion of the lesson. He had written several chord progressions on the board and was asking students to identify them by ear. Maya watched as students struggled with progressions she could identify instantly, their faces scrunched in concentration as they tried to parse the harmonies. "This is a tough one," Professor Williams said, playing a complex jazz progression. "Don't worry if you don't get it right away. These extended chords can be tricky." Maya bit her lip to keep from calling out the answer. It was a simple two-vuoi progression in C major with some added ninths and elevenths. She had played variations of this progression thousands of times, but she forced herself to remain silent. The last thing she wanted was to show off or make her classmates feel bad. After several students guessed incorrectly, Professor Williams provided the answer and moved on to the next example. Maya continued taking notes, writing down information she already knew by heart. It felt strange to be in a classroom again, especially one where the material was so basic compared to what she was used to. But there was something comforting about it, too. For the first time in months, she wasn't being judged or evaluated. She was just another student trying to learn dot. As class ended, Professor Williams called out the homework assignment. They were supposed to analyze a Bach chorale and identify the harmonic progressions. Maya had analyzed dozens of Bach chorales during her undergraduate studies, but she wrote down the assignment anyway. Maybe it would be good to revisit the fundamentals. Students began packing up their things, chatting about their plans for the rest of the day. Maya took her time putting away her books, not wanting to get caught up in conversations about her background or experience. She had learned to be vague about her past, sharing just enough information to be polite without revealing too much. As she was leaving the classroom, Professor Williams called her name. Her heart skipped a beat, worried that somehow he had figured out who she really was. But when she approached his desk, his expression was simply kind and welcoming. "Maya, I wanted to check in with you about the coursework. I know joining a class mid-semester can be challenging. If you need any extra help or want to go over any of the material we've covered, please don't hesitate to ask." "Thank you, Professor Williams. I appreciate that. Also, I noticed you're quite focused during class. That's wonderful to see. Many students struggle with the transition to university-level music theory. You seem to be handling it well." Maya smiled, touched by his concern. "I'm just trying to do my best." "Well, keep it up. And remember, my office hours are Tuesday and Thursday afternoons if you ever need anything." Walking back to her dorm room, Maya reflected on her first day. It had been easier than she had expected, but also more difficult in ways she hadn't anticipated. Being surrounded by music again brought back memories of her previous life, both good and painful. She thought about the conservatory, about the pressure and the expectations, about the way her world had crumbled when she couldn't handle it anymore. But there was something different about this environment. The students here seemed more relaxed, more focused on learning than on competing. Professor Williams clearly cared about his students as individuals, not just as potential performers. Maybe this was exactly what she needed, a place where she could reconnect with her love of music without all the baggage that had driven her away. That evening, Maya sat at the small upright piano in the practice room down the hall from her dorm. She had been avoiding playing seriously for months, but being in class today had stirred something in her. She started with simple scales, her fingers remembering the familiar patterns. Then she moved to some basic exercises, feeling the tension in her shoulders slowly release as she played. For the first time in months, Maya felt a spark of hope. Maybe she could build something new here, something that honored her past while creating space for whatever came next. She was tired of running from her abilities, but she wasn't ready to fully embrace them either. This middle ground, this chance to be just another student, might be exactly what she needed to heal. 3 weeks had passed since Maya's first day at Riverside University, and she had settled into a comfortable routine. She attended classes quietly, took detailed notes, and kept her interactions with classmates polite but brief. The music theory coursework felt like a gentle warm-up compared to her previous intense training, and she found herself genuinely enjoying the relaxed pace of learning on this particular Tuesday morning. Maya noticed an unusual energy in the classroom. Students were whispering among themselves, and several looked nervous. Lisa, the friendly redhead she had met on her first day, was chewing her pen anxiously. Even the usually confident students in the front row seemed on edge. Professor Williams entered the room carrying a thick folder and wearing an expression that was both serious and excited. He set the folder on his desk with a deliberate thud. That made several students jump. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his voice carrying a note of anticipation. "I hope you're all ready for some exciting news." Maya looked around the room. The word exciting didn't seem to match the worried faces of her classmates. "As you know, we're approaching the midpoint of the semester," Professor Williams continued, pacing in front of the blackboard. "This means it's time for your major performance evaluation." A collective groan rose from the students. Maya felt her stomach flutter, though she wasn't sure why. Performance evaluations were nothing new to her, but something about the atmosphere in the room made her uneasy. "Now, before anyone panics," Professor Williams said, raising his hands to quiet the murmurs, "let me explain what this involves. Each of you will be required to perform a solo piece in front of the entire music department. This includes faculty, graduate students, and your peers." Maya's pen froze over her notebook. A solo performance in front of the entire department was exactly the kind of attention she had been trying to avoid. "The performance will account for 30% of your semester grade," Professor Williams continued. "But more importantly, it's an opportunity for you to showcase your growth and challenge yourself as a musician." A student in the middle row raised her hand. "Professor Williams, do we get to choose our own pieces?" "I'm glad you asked, Jessica." Professor Williams smiled and opened the thick folder on his desk. "I've carefully selected pieces for each of you based on your current skill level and areas where I think you need to grow." Maya felt her heart sink. She had been hoping for the freedom to choose something simple and understated, something that wouldn't draw too much attention to her abilities. "I've spent considerable time matching each student with a piece that will push you just beyond your comfort zone," Professor Williams explained. "Growth happens when we challenge ourselves, not when we stay safely within our limits." He began walking around the room, handing out sheet music to each student. Maya watched as her classmates received their assignments, their reactions ranging from relief to outright terror. Lisa received what looked like a violin concerto and immediately started shaking her head. "Professor Williams, I don't think I can handle this," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lisa, I have complete confidence in your abilities." Professor Williams replied gently, "You've been working hard all semester, and I believe you're ready for this challenge." Maya observed the interaction with growing concern. If Professor Williams was giving challenging pieces to students like Lisa, who had been playing violin for years, what would he assign to her? She had deliberately kept her abilities hidden, so he would have no way of knowing what she was truly capable of. As Professor Williams made his way around the room, Maya caught glimpses of the pieces he was distributing. Most were intermediate to advanced works that would require significant practice and technical skill. Her palms began to sweat as she realized the position she had put herself in by keeping quiet about her background. Finally, Professor Williams approached her desk. He was smiling, but there was something in his expression that made Maya's stomach turn. "Maya, I've given your assignment a lot of thought," he said, placing a thick stack of sheet music in front of her. "Since you're new to our program and still finding your footing, I wanted to give you something that would really help you grow." Maya looked down at the music and felt her breath catch. The title page read La Campanella by Franz Liszt. She blinked, hoping she had misread it, but the words remained the same. This was one of the most technically demanding pieces in the classical piano repertoire, a piece that had challenged even the most skilled pianists she had known at the conservatory. "I know it looks intimidating," Professor Williams continued, his voice kind but firm, "but I believe that sometimes we discover our true potential only when we're faced with what seems impossible." Maya stared at the music, her mind racing. She knew this piece well, had actually performed it in concert several times during her conservatory years. But Professor Williams didn't know that. From his perspective, he was assigning one of the most difficult pieces in the piano literature to a student he believed was struggling with basic music theory. "Professor Williams," Maya said carefully, "are you sure this is appropriate for my level?" "Maya, I understand your concern," he replied, his tone gentle but encouraging. "But I've been teaching for over 20 years, and I've learned to see potential in students even when they can't see it in themselves. You have something special, even if you don't realize it yet." Maya felt a wave of panic wash over her. This was exactly the kind of situation she had been trying to avoid. She couldn't perform this piece without revealing her true abilities, but she also couldn't refuse the assignment without seeming ungrateful or lazy. "I've noticed how intently you listen during class," Professor Williams continued. "The way you absorb information suggests a deep understanding of music that goes beyond what you might think you possess. This piece will help you access that understanding." Around the room, other students were already discussing their assignments with their neighbors. Maya could hear fragments of conversations about practice schedules and technical challenges. She looked down at the list again, feeling trapped between her desire to remain invisible and her respect for her professor's authority. "How long do we have to prepare?" asked a student from the front row. 6 weeks, Professor Williams replied. "The performances will be held during the first week of November. That gives you plenty of time to work on technique, interpretation, and stage presence." 6 weeks. Maya knew she could perform this piece tomorrow if she wanted to. She had spent months perfecting it years ago, working with private instructors and master class teachers to achieve the level of technical precision and musical interpretation that Liszt demanded. But performing it now would raise questions she wasn't ready to answer. As class ended, students began gathering their things and discussing their assignments. Maya sat frozen in her seat, staring at the music in front of her. She could hear Lisa talking to another student about finding extra practice time, and a boy near the window was already looking overwhelmed by his assignment. "Maya?" "Professor." Williams approached her desk again. "Are you all right? You look a bit pale." "I'm fine," Maya managed. "Just processing everything." "I understand this is a big challenge," he said, sitting on the edge of the desk next to her. "But I want you to know that I'm here to support you. If you need extra help with technique or interpretation, don't hesitate to ask." Maya nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on her. Here was a professor offering to help her with a piece she had already mastered, while she sat there pretending to be intimidated by music she could play in her sleep. "I've also arranged for you to have access to the concert hall piano for practice," Professor Williams continued. "It's a beautiful Steinway, and I think you'll find it inspiring to work on." "That's very kind of you," Maya said, finally finding her voice. "Maya, I want you to know that I believe in you," Professor Williams said, his voice sincere. "I know this seems overwhelming now, but I have a feeling you're going to surprise yourself with what you're capable of." After Professor Williams left, Maya remained in her seat, staring at the sheet music. Other students had already gone, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the weight of her deception. She had wanted to start fresh, to experience music without the pressure of expectations, but now she found herself in an impossible situation. She thought about her options. She could go to Professor Williams and explain that the piece was too difficult, ask for something simpler. But that would mean admitting that she had been dishonest about her abilities, and it might raise questions about why she was in the program at all. Alternatively, she could try to perform the piece badly, making deliberate mistakes to match Professor Williams' expectations of her skill level. But the thought of intentionally butchering a piece she loved felt wrong, almost disrespectful to the music itself, or she could perform it well and deal with the consequences. But that would mean giving up the anonymity she had worked so hard to maintain, and she wasn't sure she was ready for that kind of attention. Maya gathered her things slowly, the sheet music feeling heavier in her hands than it should have. As she walked across campus toward her dorm, she reflected on how complicated her simple desire for a fresh start had become. The next few days at Riverside University felt different for Maya. Word had spread quickly about the performance assignments, and everywhere she went, students were talking about their pieces. In the cafeteria, she overheard worried conversations about practice schedules and technical difficulties. In the hallways, she saw fellow music students carrying their sheet music, studying the notes while they walked. Maya tried to avoid these conversations, but it was impossible to escape them entirely. During her music history class, the professor even mentioned the upcoming performances, wishing everyone luck with their preparations. Maya felt her cheeks burn as several students glanced in her direction with what looked like sympathy. It was during lunch on Thursday that Maya first realized just how her classmates viewed her situation. She was sitting alone at a corner table, trying to focus on her sandwich and a textbook, when she heard her name mentioned at the table behind her. "I can't believe Professor Williams gave Maya that piece," Lisa was saying to two other students. "La Campanella is insane. Even advanced students struggle with it. Maybe he made a mistake?" suggested another voice that Maya recognized as belonging to Tyler, a quiet boy who played French horn. "No way," Lisa replied. "Professor Williams doesn't make mistakes like that. He must have his reasons, but I honestly don't know what he's thinking." Maya's stomach twisted as she listened to their conversation. She wanted to turn around and tell them it was fine, that she could handle it, but that would only raise more questions. "Poor Maya," said a third voice that Maya didn't recognize. "She seems so nice and quiet. I hope she doesn't get too stressed out about it. Should we offer to help her?" Tyler asked. "I mean, maybe we could practice together or something?" "I don't think any of us are qualified to help with Liszt," Lisa said with a laugh. "That's like graduate level stuff, maybe even beyond that." Maya set down her sandwich, her appetite completely gone. She gathered her things and left the cafeteria, feeling the weight of her classmates' pity and concern. This was exactly what she had been trying to avoid: being the center of attention, being seen as someone who needed help or special treatment. The afternoon brought an even more uncomfortable encounter. Maya was walking to her dorm when she heard someone calling her name. She turned to see David, the teaching assistant from her music theory class, jogging to catch up with her. "Maya, wait up," he said, slightly out of breath. "I'm glad I caught you." David was a graduate student who helped Professor Williams with grading and occasionally led discussion sections. He was known for being kind and approachable, which made Maya particularly wary of whatever he was about to say. "I wanted to talk to you about your performance piece," David said once he had caught his breath. "I know Professor Williams assigned you La Campanella?" Maya nodded, unsure of where this conversation was heading. "Look, I don't want to overstep," David continued, "but I've been working with Professor Williams for 2 years now, and I've never seen him assign that piece to an undergraduate student, especially not to someone who's new to the program." "Okay," Maya said carefully. "I think there might have been some kind of mix-up," David said. "Maybe he grabbed the wrong sheet music or got confused about which student was getting which piece. It happens sometimes when he's preparing assignments for multiple classes." Maya felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was her way out. "What do you think I should do?" "I could talk to him for you," David offered. "I could explain that you're still adjusting to the program and suggest that maybe a different piece would be more appropriate. There are plenty of beautiful intermediate pieces that would be challenging but not overwhelming." The offer was tempting. Maya could see the easy path stretching out in front of her: accept David's help, get a different piece, perform something simple and safe, and maintain her cover. But something about the situation bothered her. The idea of David going to Professor Williams and essentially saying she wasn't capable enough felt wrong, even if it was true from their perspective. "I appreciate the offer," Maya said slowly, "but I think I should handle this myself. If I need to change pieces, I'll talk to Professor Williams directly." David looked surprised but nodded. "That's very mature of you. But Maya, please don't let pride get in the way of making a smart decision. There's no shame in acknowledging when something is beyond your current level." After David left, Maya felt more confused than ever. Everyone around her was treating her like she was heading for disaster, and their kindness only made her deception feel worse. She had never intended to mislead anyone, but now she was trapped in a web of assumptions and good intentions. That evening, Maya decided to visit one of the practice rooms to think things through. She needed to feel the keys under her fingers, to reconnect with the music that had brought her so much joy before everything had gone wrong. The practice rooms were located in the basement of the music building. They were small, soundproofed, spaces with upright pianos and barely enough room for a piano bench and a music stand. Maya had been avoiding them since her arrival, not wanting to risk being overheard by other students, but tonight she felt like she had no choice. She found room B7 empty and slipped inside, closing the door behind her. The piano was older than she would have preferred and slightly out of tune, but it would serve her purpose. She set the list sheet music on the stand. Even though she didn't really need it, Maya sat down at the bench and placed her hands on the keys. For a moment, she just sat there, feeling the familiar weight of the keys beneath her fingers. Then, almost without thinking, she began to play. The opening notes of La Campanella filled the small room, and Maya felt something inside her chest relax for the first time in days. Her fingers moved across the keys with practiced ease, navigating the technical passages that had once seemed impossible to her. The music flowed through her, reminding her of why she had fallen in love with piano in the first place. She played for nearly an hour, working through the entire piece twice. It felt good to play with full expression again, to let her technical skills show without worrying about what anyone would think. In this small, soundproofed room, she could be herself. Again, when she finally stopped playing, Maya sat in the silence for a moment, her hands still resting on the keys. She realized that she had been holding her breath, and she exhaled slowly. The music had reminded her of something important. Her abilities weren't something to be ashamed of or hidden away. They were a part of who she was, whether she was ready to admit it or not. But as she packed up her things and prepared to leave the practice room, Maya's moment of clarity faded. She still had no idea how to handle her situation. She couldn't keep pretending that this piece was beyond her abilities. But she also wasn't ready to reveal the truth about her background. As she walked back to her dorm, Maya passed other students heading to and from the practice rooms. She could hear muffled sounds of practicing coming from behind the closed doors, scales, etudes, and pieces being worked out one phrase at a time. These were the sounds of students genuinely struggling with challenging music, putting in the hard work required to improve their skills. Maya felt a pang of guilt as she realized that she was essentially taking up a spot in the program that could have gone to someone who actually needed the instruction she was receiving. These students were working hard to develop abilities that she already possessed, while she sat in classes pretending to learn concepts she had mastered years ago. The next morning brought another uncomfortable encounter. Maya was getting coffee before her first class when she ran into Jessica, one of the more outgoing students from her music theory class. "Maya, how's the practicing going?" Jessica asked with a bright smile that didn't quite hide the concern in her eyes. "It's going fine," Maya replied, hoping to keep the conversation brief. "Really? Because I have to say, I'm struggling with my piece and it's nowhere near as difficult as yours. I can't imagine trying to tackle Liszt at this point in my studies." "Everyone learns at their own pace," Maya said diplomatically. "That's true, but La Campanella is in a league of its own," Jessica continued. "I looked it up online, and there are videos of professional pianists talking about how challenging it is. Some of them say it took them years to master it." Maya felt her stomach drop. She hadn't considered that her classmates might research their pieces online. If they were watching videos of professional performances, they would have some idea of what the piece was supposed to sound like when performed correctly. "I'm just taking it one day at a time," Maya said. "Well, if you ever want to practice together or just need someone to vent to, I'm here," Jessica offered. "This whole performance requirement is stressing everyone out. We're all in this together." As Maya walked to class, she thought about Jessica's words. "We're all in this together." Except Maya wasn't really in it with them at all. She was watching from the outside, pretending to share their struggles while hiding her true abilities. The irony of her situation wasn't lost on her. She had come to Riverside to escape the pressure and competitiveness of her previous musical life, but now she was creating a different kind of pressure for herself. 2 weeks had passed since Maya received her assignment, and she had developed a careful routine to maintain her secret. Every night after 11 p.m., when the music building was nearly empty, she would slip into practice room B7 with her sheet music tucked under her arm. She had memorized the security guard's rounds and knew exactly when she could move through the building unnoticed. Tonight was no different. Maya waited in her dorm room until the campus grew quiet, then made her way across the moonlit courtyard to the music building. Her student ID gave her 24-hour access, something she was grateful for now more than ever. The building felt different at night, peaceful and mysterious, with only the soft hum of fluorescent lights in the hallways. As she descended to the basement level where the practice rooms were located, Maya heard something unexpected. The faint sound of piano music was drifting from one of the rooms. She paused at the bottom of the stairs, listening carefully. It was Chopin's Minute Waltz, being played with decent technique but obvious struggle in the faster passages. Maya crept closer to identify which room the music was coming from. Through the small window in the door of practice room B3, she could see Tyler, the quiet French horn player from her theory class. He was hunched over an old upright piano, his brow furrowed in concentration as he worked through a particularly challenging section. She watched him for a moment, struck by his dedication. Tyler was clearly not a pianist. His hand position was awkward and he was having to look down at the keys constantly. But he was determined, playing the same difficult passage over and over again, each time getting a little bit better. Maya realized he must be preparing for the same performance requirement, probably as a secondary instrument demonstration. The sight of his genuine struggle made her feel even worse about her own deception. Here was someone putting in real effort to learn something new, while she was hiding abilities that could help not just herself, but others who were struggling. She quietly moved past his practice room and slipped into B7, her usual hideaway. As she settled at the piano bench, Maya could still hear Tyler's patient practice session through the thin walls. The sound served as a constant reminder of what honest effort looked like. Maya opened her sheet music, even though she barely needed to look at it anymore. She had been using these late-night sessions to work on her interpretation of the piece, trying to find a way to perform it that would be impressive enough to satisfy Professor Williams, but not so polished that it would raise suspicions about her background. It was a delicate balance. La Campanella demanded technical precision. There was no way to fake your way through the rapid scales and complex fingering patterns. But Maya could control her musical expression, the subtle dynamics and phrasing that separated a competent performance from a masterful one. As she began to play, Maya found herself thinking about her old life. She remembered her first time performing this piece in a master class at the conservatory. The instructor, a renowned Russian pianist, had praised her technical execution but pushed her to find more emotional depth in the music. "Technique is just the beginning," he had said. "Music lives in the spaces between the notes, in the breath before each phrase." Tonight, Maya tried to forget those lessons. She played the piece cleanly and accurately but held back the emotional nuances that would reveal her deep understanding of the music. It felt wrong, like wearing clothes that didn't fit properly. But she forced herself to maintain the charade. After an hour of practice, Maya heard Tyler's piano fall silent in the neighboring room. She waited a few minutes, then heard his footsteps in the hallway as he left for the night. The building returned to its peaceful quiet, leaving Maya alone with her conflicted thoughts. The next morning brought an unexpected challenge. Maya was walking to her music theory class when she spotted Professor Williams in the hallway, engaged in conversation with David, the teaching assistant. They were standing near the bulletin board where concert announcements were posted, and both looked concerned about something. Maya tried to walk past without drawing attention, but Professor Williams called out to her. "Maya, perfect timing. David and I were just discussing the upcoming performances." Maya's heart began to race, but she managed to keep her expression neutral. "Oh? Yes, we've been talking about the practice schedule and making sure everyone has adequate access to instruments," Professor Williams continued. "David mentioned that he's concerned about some students not getting enough practice time." David nodded seriously. "I've been doing spot checks on the practice rooms, and I'm worried that some students aren't putting in the necessary hours, especially for the more challenging pieces." Maya felt like they were looking directly at her, even though their comments seemed to be about the student body in general. "Maya, how are you finding the practice facilities?" Professor Williams asked. "Are you able to get enough time with the piano?" "Yes, they're fine," Maya replied carefully. "I've been able to practice when I need to." "Good, good. And how is the piece coming along? I know it's quite demanding." Maya hesitated, unsure how to answer. If she said it was going well, they might ask her to demonstrate. If she said it was difficult, they might offer help she couldn't accept without exposing herself. "It's challenging, but I'm working through it step by step," she said. Finally, Professor Williams smiled approvingly. "That's exactly the right approach. Liszt requires patience and persistence. Don't try to rush the learning process." After they parted ways, Maya felt shaken by the encounter. She realized that Professor Williams and David were probably monitoring all the students' progress, which meant she needed to be even more careful about when and how she practiced. That afternoon, Maya decided to take a different approach. Instead of avoiding her classmates' conversations about the performances, she would try to participate in them in a way that might provide cover for her situation. She found her opportunity during lunch. Lisa was sitting with Jessica and two other students, all discussing their practice challenges. Maya approached their table with her lunch tray. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. "Of course," Lisa said, gesturing to an empty chair. "We were just commiserating about how stressed we all are." Maya sat down and listened as the others talked about their pieces. Jessica was working on a Mozart sonata and struggling with the tempo in the final movement. Another student, Rachel, was preparing a Brahms intermezzo and finding the emotional interpretation difficult. "What about you, Maya?" Jessica asked. "How's the list going?" Maya had prepared for this question. "It's definitely the hardest thing I've ever attempted," she said, which was technically true. It had been the hardest thing when she first learned it years ago. "I'm trying to take it one section at a time." "That's smart," Lisa said. "Are you able to get through any of it yet, or are you still working on individual passages?" This was trickier territory. Maya needed to sound like she was making progress without revealing how much she actually knew. "I can get through some of the slower sections," she said carefully. "The fast parts are still pretty rough." "I can't even imagine," Rachel said with a shudder. "I looked up some recordings online and it's absolutely insane. The speed alone is terrifying." Maya nodded, trying to look appropriately intimidated. Inside, she felt guilty for deceiving these kind, supportive students who were genuinely worried about her. "Have you thought about asking for help?" Lisa suggested. "Maybe one of the grad students could give you some tips on technique?" "I might do that," Maya said, knowing she had no intention of asking for help. "Right now, I'm just trying to figure out the fingering for some of the passages." The conversation moved on to other topics, but Maya continued to feel uncomfortable about her deception. These students were being so open about their struggles and fears, while she sat there pretending to share experiences she had moved beyond years ago. After lunch, Maya had a few hours before her next class, so she decided to visit the music library. She told herself she was looking for recordings of La Campanella to study different interpretations, but really she was trying to understand what her classmates were seeing when they researched the piece online. The library had an extensive collection of classical recordings, and Maya found several versions of La Campanella performed by famous pianists. She put on headphones and listened to a recording by a renowned Italian pianist, trying to hear it the way her classmates might. As something impossibly difficult and beyond their current abilities, the pianist's interpretation was brilliant, full of technical fireworks and musical sophistication that had taken years to develop. Maya could hear every nuance, every subtle choice in phrasing and dynamics, but she also realized that to her classmates this probably sounded like something from another world, as foreign and unattainable as speaking a language they had never heard before. She listened. Maya began to understand the depth of the gap between her abilities and her classmates' perceptions of her. They weren't just assuming she would struggle with the piece, they were assuming she would struggle to even approach the level needed to perform it. Recognizably, this realization brought a new problem. If Maya performed the piece too well, it wouldn't just raise questions about her background, it would be completely impossible to explain. With only 2 weeks left before the performance, Maya could feel the weight of everyone's expectations pressing down on her. The atmosphere on campus had shifted as the date approached. Students walked around looking stressed, carrying their sheet music everywhere, and practice rooms were booked solid from morning until late at night. Maya continued her routine of late-night practice sessions, but now she wasn't alone in staying up late. She often encountered other students in the hallways, looking tired and frustrated as they returned from hours of practice. The sight of their genuine exhaustion made her feel even worse about her deception. It was on a Tuesday evening that Maya's carefully constructed world began to crack. She was walking to her usual practice room when she heard voices coming from the main office area upstairs. The music building's acoustics carried sound in unexpected ways, and she could clearly hear Professor Williams talking with someone. "I'm really concerned about Maya Chen," Professor Williams was saying. "The performance is in 2 weeks, and I haven't heard any evidence that she's making progress with the piece." Maya froze at the bottom of the stairwell, her heart pounding. "Have you considered that maybe the piece really is too difficult for her?" The second voice belonged to Dr. Reynolds, the department head. "La Campanella is graduate-level repertoire. Even some of our advanced students would struggle with it." "I know. It's challenging," Professor Williams replied. "But I have a feeling about this student. There's something about the way she listens in class, the way she absorbs information. I think she has more potential than she realizes." "William, your instincts about students are usually excellent, but even you can't work miracles. If she's not ready for this level of music, pushing her might do more harm than good." Maya heard the sound of papers shuffling. "I've been thinking about calling her in for a progress check," Professor Williams said. "Maybe I should hear how she's doing with the piece before the performance. If she's really struggling, we could make adjustments. That might be wise. The last thing we want is for a student to have a breakdown during the performance. That wouldn't be good for anyone." Maya's blood ran cold. A progress check would expose everything. There was no way she could pretend to struggle with passages she had mastered years ago, but performing them well would raise impossible questions. She quietly retreated from the stairwell and headed back to her dorm, her mind racing. The next morning, Maya found an email waiting for her from Professor Williams, asking her to come to his office during his office hours on Thursday afternoon. The message was polite and encouraging, but Maya could read between the lines. This was the progress check she had overheard them discussing. She had less than 48 hours to figure out what she was going to do. Maya spent Wednesday in a state of anxiety that made it impossible to concentrate on her other classes. During music theory, she found herself staring at Professor Williams, wondering what he would think when he discovered the truth. Would he be angry that she had deceived him? Disappointed that she had wasted his time and energy? That evening, Maya did something she hadn't done since arriving at Riverside. She called her older sister, Chun Wei, who lived across the country. "Maya, it's so good to hear from you," Wei said when she answered the phone. How are things going at school? Maya had been vague with her family about her reasons for leaving the conservatory and transferring to Riverside. She had told them she wanted to explore different aspects of music education, but she hadn't shared the full truth about her struggles with performance anxiety and the pressure she had been feeling. "Wei, I need to talk to someone," Maya said, her voice shaking slightly. "I think I've made a huge mistake." "What's wrong? Are you okay?" Maya found herself telling her sister everything, about hiding her abilities, about the impossible assignment, about the progress check she was supposed to attend tomorrow. Wei listened without interrupting, letting Maya pour out all her fears and confusion. "Oh, Maya," Wei said softly when Maya finished. "Why didn't you tell anyone about your background when you started?" "I just wanted to be normal for once," Maya sighed. "I wanted to experience music without all the pressure and expectations. But now I'm trapped, and I don't know what to do. Have you considered just telling the truth?" "How can I? Professor Williams will think I've been lying to him this whole time, and my classmates will feel betrayed. They've been so kind and supportive, thinking I was struggling like they are." Wei was quiet for a moment. "Maya, do you remember what Mom used to say when we were little and got ourselves into trouble by trying to fix our mistakes with more mistakes?" Maya smiled despite her stress. "The truth always weighs less than the lies needed to hide it." "Exactly. You've been carrying this secret for weeks now, and it's clearly making you miserable. Don't you think it's time to put it down?" After talking with her sister, Maya felt a little clearer about what she needed to do, but she still wasn't sure she had the courage to do it. She spent a restless night thinking about Professor Williams' office hours, imagining different scenarios for how the meeting might go. Thursday afternoon arrived too quickly. Maya stood outside Professor Williams' office door, her hand raised to knock, frozen with indecision. She could hear him inside, talking on the phone about scheduling for next semester. Through the small window in his door, she could see him. At his desk, surrounded by stacks of sheet music and student papers. Finally, Maya knocked. "Come in," Professor Williams called out. Maya entered the familiar office, which was exactly as she remembered from her first day, warm and cluttered, with photos of former students and concert programs covering the walls. Professor Williams smiled and gestured for her to sit in the chair across from his desk. "Maya, thank you for coming. I wanted to check in with you about how things are going with your performance piece." Maya sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Professor Williams, before we talk about that, there's something I need to tell you." He raised his eyebrows, clearly not expecting this direction for the conversation. "Of course, what's on your mind?" Maya took a deep breath. "I haven't been completely honest with you about my background." Professor Williams leaned back in his chair, his expression becoming more serious. "What do you mean?" "When I transferred here, I told you I was from a small school in California." "That's true, but it wasn't the whole truth. Before that, I was a student at the Los Angeles Conservatory." Professor Williams' eyes widened slightly. "The Los Angeles Conservatory was one of the most prestigious music schools in the country." "I see," he said carefully. "And why didn't you mention this when you applied to our program?" Maya felt her cheeks burning. "I was having some personal difficulties with the pressure and competition there. I needed to take a break from that environment, and I thought coming here would let me experience music in a different way." "That's understandable," Professor Williams said, his tone gentle. "But Maya, I'm still not sure why you felt you couldn't share this with us." "This was the hardest part." Maya looked down at her hands. "Because I wanted to be just another student. I was tired of being seen as a performer first and a person second. I thought if I kept my background quiet, I could just focus on learning, without all the expectations." Professor Williams was quiet for a long moment. "Maya, how familiar are you with the piece I assigned you?" Maya felt her stomach drop. This was the moment of truth. "Very familiar," she said quietly. "I performed it in a master class 2 years ago." Professor Williams stared at her for what felt like an eternity. Then, unexpectedly, he began to laugh. "Maya, do you realize what you've put me through these past few weeks? I've been losing sleep worrying about whether I'd made a terrible mistake with that assignment." Maya looked up in surprise. You're not angry? Angry? No, I'm not angry. Confused. Yes, a little concerned about why you felt you needed to hide your abilities, definitely, but not angry. Professor Williams stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the campus courtyard where students were walking between classes. Maya, I've been teaching for 25 years, and I've learned that students have all kinds of reasons for the choices they make. Some of those reasons are good, some are misguided, and some are just human. He turned back to face her. What I'm curious about is what you want to do now. The performance is in less than 2 weeks, and you're clearly capable of playing the piece, but I suspect this isn't really about the music anymore. Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes. I don't know what I want to do. I'm scared that everyone will feel like I've been lying to them. Have you been lying to them? Maya thought about this carefully. Not exactly. I've been hiding things, but I haven't told any direct lies. There's an important difference, Professor Williams said, sitting back down. Maya, let me ask you something. What did you hope to gain by keeping your background secret? I wanted to remember why I love music, Maya said, the words coming out in a rush. At the conservatory, everything became about competition and perfection. And proving myself, I stopped feeling joy when I played. I thought if I could start over, maybe I could find that joy again. Professor Williams nodded thoughtfully. And have you? Found that joy again? Maya considered this. Despite all the stress of her deception, she realized that her late-night practice sessions in the small. The morning of the performance arrived with unseasonably warm weather for November. Maya woke up early, her stomach churning with nerves that had nothing to do with the music she would be playing. After her honest conversation with Professor Williams the previous week, they had decided together that she would go ahead with the performance as planned. Your classmates deserve to see what you're capable of, Professor Williams had said. And you deserve the chance to share your gift without apology. But now, sitting on the edge of her bed in the early morning light, Maya wasn't sure she was ready for what would happen after she played. Professor Williams had promised to handle any questions that arose. But Maya knew that performing La Campanella at the level she was capable of would change everything. She dressed carefully in the black dress she had brought from California, one she had worn for countless recitals and competitions. The fabric felt familiar against her skin, like putting on armor for battle. But this wasn't a battle against other musicians. It was a battle against her own fear of being seen for who she really was. By 10 o'clock, Maya was walking across campus toward the concert hall. Students and faculty were already gathering for the performance showcase, which would run from 11 in the morning until late afternoon. Everyone in the music department was required to attend, and many students had invited family members to come watch. Maya entered through the stage door, avoiding the main lobby where people were mingling and chatting. Backstage was buzzing with nervous energy as students warmed up their instruments and ran through difficult passages one last time. She found a quiet corner and sat down with her sheet music, even though she had memorized every note weeks ago. Maya, Lisa's voice called, out from across the backstage area. There you are. I've been looking for you. Lisa hurried over, her violin case in one hand and her bow in the other. She looked pale and nervous, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by pre-performance anxiety. How are you feeling? Lisa asked, sitting down next to Maya. I'm terrified. I'd barely slept last night. I'm nervous too, Maya said, which was true, though probably not for the reasons Lisa imagined. I still can't believe Professor Williams gave you that piece, Lisa said, shaking her head. I mean, I know he sees potential in students, but La Campanella is just insane. Promise me you won't be too hard on yourself if it doesn't go perfectly. Nobody expects you to play it like a professional. Maya felt her throat tighten. In a few hours, Lisa would discover just how wrong that assumption was. I'll do my best, Maya said quietly. Other students began gathering around them. Tyler, the French horn player she had seen practicing piano late at night, sat down nearby. He looked exhausted but determined. Did everyone see the program? Jessica asked, waving a printed sheet. Maya's performing in the final section with the advanced students. Maya's heart skipped. She hadn't realized she had been scheduled near the end of the program. Professor Williams must have arranged this deliberately, knowing that her performance would require some explanation. "That's perfect," Rachel said encouragingly. "You'll have all day to prepare mentally. Just try to relax and enjoy listening." To everyone else. As the morning progressed, Maya sat in the audience watching her classmates perform. The quality was exactly what she expected from undergraduate students. Earnest, hardworking, with moments of real beauty mixed with technical struggles. Each performer received warm applause and encouraging comments from Professor Williams, who was serving as the host for the event. Lisa's violin performance was better than Maya had expected. She made it through her piece with only a few minor slip-ups, and her musical expression was genuine and heartfelt. When she finished, she looked relieved and proud. And Maya felt happy for her friend's success. Tyler's piano performance was particularly moving to watch. He had chosen a simple Chopin waltz, something much more appropriate for his skill level than what Maya had observed him practicing weeks earlier. His technique was still awkward, but he played with such sincerity that the audience was clearly touched by his effort. As the afternoon wore on, the level of performance gradually increased. The advanced undergraduate students played with more confidence and technical skill, and Maya began to feel the familiar pre-performance energy building in her chest. It had been months since she had played for an audience, and despite her anxiety about the revelation to come, she found herself looking forward to making music again. "Ladies and gentlemen," Professor Williams announced as the program neared its end, "we have just a few more performances this afternoon. Our next student is Maya Chun, who will be performing Franz Liszt's La Campanella." Maya heard several gasps from the audience. Even the advanced students seemed surprised by the choice of repertoire. She stood up from her seat in the audience, her legs feeling slightly unsteady, and made her way toward the stage. As she walked down the aisle, Maya could feel hundreds of eyes following her. She heard whispered conversations starting up around the auditorium. By now, word had spread about the piece she was attempting, and everyone was curious to see what would happen. Professor Williams met her at the side of the stage. "How are you feeling?" he asked quietly. "Ready," Maya said, and she realized it was true. She was ready to stop hiding, ready to share her music, ready to face whatever questions would come afterward. "Remember, just play your music," Professor Williams said. "Don't think about anything else?" Maya nodded and walked onto the stage. The concert hall was larger than she had remembered, with tiered seating that rose up into darkness beyond the stage lights. She could see her classmates in the front rows, their faces a mixture of curiosity and concern. The piano on stage was indeed the beautiful Steinway that Professor Williams had mentioned. Maya approached it reverently, running her fingers along its polished surface before sitting down at the bench. She adjusted the height slightly and positioned her hands over the keys. For a moment, the auditorium was completely silent. Maya could hear her own heartbeat and the slight hum of the air conditioning system. She took a deep breath and began to play. The opening notes of La Campanella rang out clear and precise. From the very first phrase, Maya could feel the audience's attention shift. These weren't the tentative, careful notes of a student struggling with difficult music. These were the confident, expressive phrases of someone who knew this piece intimately. As Maya moved into the first technical passage, she heard an audible intake of breath from somewhere in the audience. Her fingers flew across the keys with ease, navigating the complex runs and arpeggios that had intimidated pianists for generations. But more than the technical display, Maya poured genuine musical expression into every phrase. She had forgotten how good it felt to play without holding back. For months, she had been restraining herself both in her secret practice sessions and in her daily life. Now, finally, she was free to let her music speak with its full voice. Halfway through the piece, Maya glanced up briefly and caught sight of her classmates in the front row. Lisa's mouth was hanging open in shock. Tyler was leaning forward in his seat, his eyes wide with amazement. Jessica looked like she was witnessing something impossible, but Maya also saw something else in their faces. Not anger or betrayal, but wonder and excitement. They were hearing something beautiful, And their surprise was giving way to appreciation for the music itself. Maya returned her attention to the piano and continued playing. The second half of the piece contained some of the most challenging passages in the piano repertoire, but Maya navigated them with the confidence that came from years of dedicated practice. Her interpretation was mature and nuanced, showing not just technical skill but deep musical understanding. As she approached the final section, Maya felt a familiar rush of performance energy. This was why she had fallen in love with music in the first place. This connection between performer and audience, this shared experience of beauty and expression. All the anxiety and deception of the past few weeks melted away, leaving only the pure joy of making music. The final notes of La Campanella rang out in the silent auditorium. Maya held her hands on the keys for a moment, letting the sound fade naturally. Then she looked up at the audience. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the applause began, tentative at first, then building to a thunderous ovation. Students and faculty rose to their feet, their faces showing amazement, admiration, and in some cases, complete bewilderment. Maya stood up from the piano bench and gave a small bow. As she looked out at the audience, she saw Professor Williams near the side of the stage, his face beaming with pride and satisfaction. She also saw Dr. Reynolds, the department head, shaking his head in apparent disbelief, but most importantly, she saw her classmates still applauding enthusiastically. Whatever questions they might have about how this performance was possible, their immediate reaction was one of appreciation for what they had just experienced. As Maya walked off the stage, she felt lighter than she had in months. The secret that had weighed so heavily on her was finally out in the open. She had no idea what would happen next, but for the first time since arriving at Riverside, she felt like she could be completely herself. The applause was still echoing in Maya's ears as she walked off the stage, her heart pounding with a mixture of relief and anticipation. She had done it. After weeks of hiding and anxiety, she had finally shown her classmates who she really was. But now came the part she had been dreading. Facing their questions and reactions, backstage was buzzing with activity as the remaining students prepared for their performances. But as Maya entered the area, conversation gradually stopped. Students turned to look at her with expressions she couldn't quite read: surprise, admiration, and something that might have been confusion. The first person to approach her was Tyler, the quiet French horn player who had been struggling with piano in the practice rooms. His eyes were wide with amazement, and he seemed to be having trouble finding words. Maya, that was ... double quote, he started, then stopped. I mean, where did you learn to play like that? Before Maya could answer, Lisa appeared at her side, her face flushed with excitement and bewilderment. I don't understand, Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. 3 weeks ago, you were asking questions about basic chord progressions in theory class. But what you just played, that was professional level. That was better than professional level. More students began gathering around them, and Maya could feel herself becoming the center of attention in exactly the way she had been trying to avoid for months. But something was different now. Instead of the judgmental scrutiny she remembered from the conservatory, these faces showed genuine curiosity and, to her surprise, respect. Maya, Jessica said, pushing through the small crowd that had formed. Please tell us what's going on. We've been worried about you for weeks, thinking you were going to struggle with that piece. But you just played it like you've known it your whole life. Maya looked around at her classmates' faces and realized she owed them an explanation. These people had been kind to her, had offered help and support when they thought she needed it. They deserved to know the truth. You're right, Maya said quietly. I have known that piece for a long time. I learned it 2 years ago when I was studying at the Los Angeles Conservatory. The silence that followed was so complete that Maya could hear the muffled sounds of the next performance beginning on stage. Several students exchanged glances, trying to process what she had just told them. The Los Angeles Conservatory, Rachel repeated slowly. But that's one of the most prestigious music schools in the country. Why are you here? Maya felt her cheeks burning, but she forced herself to continue. I needed a break from that environment. The pressure was becoming too much for me, and I was losing my love for music. I came here hoping to rediscover why I started playing in the first place. But why didn't you tell us? Lisa asked, her voice gentle but confused. We were all trying to help you, thinking you were struggling. This was the question Maya had been dreading, but looking at her classmates' faces, she realized they weren't angry, they were just trying to understand. I wanted to experience being a normal student, Maya explained. At the conservatory, everything was about competition and being the best. I was tired of being seen only as a performer. I wanted to just learn and enjoy music without all the expectations. Tyler nodded slowly. So when Professor Williams assigned you that piece, I panicked, Maya admitted. I couldn't figure out how to perform it without revealing my background, but I also couldn't ask for a different piece without explaining why. That must have been horrible, Jessica said sympathetically, keeping a secret like that for so long. Maya was surprised by the understanding in her voice. She had expected her classmates to feel betrayed or deceived, but instead they seemed to be trying to imagine what her experience had been like. It was, Maya said honestly. I felt terrible about not being honest with you all, especially when you were being so kind and supportive. But I didn't know how to explain without seeming like I had been lying. You weren't lying, Lisa said. Firmly. You were just not telling the whole story. There's a difference. Before Maya could respond, Professor Williams appeared backstage. The final performance of the day had just ended, and the audience was beginning to disperse. He approached Maya with a smile that was both proud and slightly amused. Maya, that was absolutely beautiful, he said. I think you accomplished exactly what you came here to do. What do you mean? Maya asked. You rediscovered your joy in music? Professor Williams replied. I could hear it in every note you played. That performance wasn't about showing off or proving anything. It was about sharing something beautiful with people who appreciate it. Maya realized he was right. For the first time in months, she had played purely for the love of music, without worrying about judges or scores or competition rankings. Professor Williams, Lisa said hesitantly, did you know about Maya's background? I found out recently, Professor Williams replied. Maya came to me and explained her situation. We decided together that the best thing to do was proceed with the performance as planned. But weren't you surprised when you first assigned her that piece? Tyler asked. Professor Williams chuckled. Actually, I had a feeling there was more to Maya than met the eye. The way she listened in class, the questions she asked, or more importantly, the questions she didn't ask, suggested a deeper understanding of music than she was letting on. Maya stared at him in shock. You knew? I suspected, Professor. Williams corrected. But I wanted to give you the space to reveal yourself when you were ready. Sometimes the best way to help a student is to trust them to find their own path. As the group continued talking, more students and faculty members approached. Word was spreading quickly about Maya's performance, and everyone wanted to understand how a seemingly struggling student had suddenly revealed such extraordinary abilities. Dr. Reynolds, the department head, appeared with several other professors. His expression was serious but not unkind. Miss Chun, he said formally, I think we need to have a conversation about your academic status here at Riverside. Maya's heart sank. She had been so focused on the performance that she hadn't considered the academic implications of her revelation. Would she be in trouble for essentially misrepresenting herself when she applied to the program? Don't look so worried, Dr. Reynolds said, noticing her expression. We're not here to scold you. We're here to figure out how we can best serve your educational goals now that we understand your actual level of preparation. Professor Williams stepped forward. Dr. Reynolds, I'd like to suggest that Maya might benefit from a more individualized program, perhaps some independent study opportunities or the chance to work with our graduate students as a mentor. That's exactly what I was thinking, Dr. Reynolds replied. Maya, your performance today demonstrated skills that are honestly beyond what our undergraduate program typically addresses. We want to make sure you're being appropriately challenged and supported. Maya felt overwhelmed by their kindness and understanding. She had expected consequences for her deception, but instead she was being offered opportunities. I don't know what to say, Maya said honestly. Say yes, Lisa encouraged her. Maya, what you played today was incredible. If you can help other students while continuing to grow yourself, that sounds perfect. And maybe you could help some of us who are actually struggling with our pieces, Tyler added with a grin. I could definitely use some piano tips from someone who actually knows what they're doing. Maya looked around at the faces surrounding her, professors who were already planning ways to support her growth, classmates who were excited rather than resentful about her abilities, and Professor Williams, who was beaming with the satisfaction of a teacher who had helped a student find their way. Okay, Maya said, feeling a smile spread across her face. Yes. As the group began to disperse, students heading home or to celebrate the end of the performance showcase, Maya found herself walking out of the concert hall with Lisa and Jessica. You know, Lisa said thoughtfully, I'm kind of glad you kept your secret for a while. Why? Maya asked. Because we got to know you as Maya the person before we knew you as Maya the incredible pianist. If you had told us on the first day that you were from the Los Angeles Conservatory, we probably would have been too intimidated to become friends. Jessica nodded in agreement. Plus, you've been a really good friend these past few weeks. You listened to us complain about our pieces, you offered encouragement when we were stressed, and you never made us feel stupid for struggling with things that were probably easy for you. Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes. Thank you, she said softly. That means more to me than you know. As they walked across the campus in the fading afternoon light, Maya reflected on how much had changed since her first day at Riverside. She had come here trying to hide from her abilities and her past, but instead she had learned that her true strength lay not in what she could play, but in who she was as a person. The secret that had felt so heavy for so many weeks was finally gone, and in its place was something much better, genuine friendships, understanding professors, and a renewed love for the music that had brought her here in the first place. Maya realized that Professor Williams had been right. She had accomplished exactly what she came to do. She had rediscovered her joy in music, and in the process, 3 months had passed since Maya's performance of La Campanella, and life at Riverside University had settled into a new rhythm. The music building felt different now, warmer, more welcoming. Maya no longer crept through the hallways trying to remain invisible. Instead, she walked with quiet confidence, greeting professors and students who had become genuine friends and colleagues. Her academic situation had indeed changed dramatically after that November afternoon. Dr. Reynolds had worked with Professor Williams to create a special program that allowed Maya to take graduate-level courses while also serving as a peer mentor for struggling undergraduate students. It was exactly the balance she had been searching for without knowing it. On this particular Tuesday evening, Maya was in practice room B7, the same small room where she had spent so many secret nights working through her conflicted feelings. But tonight, she wasn't alone. Tyler sat at the piano bench, working through a passage from a Mozart sonata, while Maya listened from a chair beside him. Try that section again, Maya suggested gently. But this time, think about the melody as a conversation. The right hand is asking a question, and the left hand is answering. Tyler nodded and played the passage again. This time, his interpretation was more musical, less mechanical. The notes seemed to flow together naturally instead of sounding like separate events. That's much better, Maya said with a smile. You're really getting the hang of thinking musically instead of just technically. I never thought about music that way before, Tyler said, turning around on the bench to face her. At first, I was just trying to get the notes right. But working with you has taught me that there's so much more to it. Maya felt a warm sense of satisfaction. This mentoring role had turned out to be one of the most rewarding aspects of her time at Riverside. Helping other students discover their own musical voices reminded her constantly of why she loved music in the first place. How are you feeling about the spring recital? Maya asked. Tyler had volunteered to perform in the informal student concert. that Professor Williams organized each semester. Nervous but excited, Tyler admitted. 6 months ago, I never would have imagined performing piano in front of people. But you've helped me realize that it's not about being perfect, it's about sharing something beautiful. As they packed up their music, Maya reflected on how much Tyler had grown as a musician. When she first saw him struggling in this very practice room, she never could have predicted that he would become one of her most dedicated students. His progress reminded her that everyone had musical potential waiting to be discovered. They walked upstairs together, passing other practice rooms where students were working on their own pieces. Maya could hear scales, etudes, and fragments of classical works filtering through the soundproof doors. These sounds, which had once made her feel guilty about her deception, now filled her with a sense of belonging and purpose. "Maya, there you are," Lisa's voice called out from down the hallway. She was walking toward them with Professor Williams, both carrying coffee cups from the campus cafe. "How did the lesson go?" Professor Williams asked as they approached. "Tyler's ready for the spring recital," Maya said proudly. "His Mozart is really coming together beautifully." Tyler beamed at the praise. "Maya's the best teacher I've ever had. She explains things in a way that actually makes sense." Professor Williams smiled knowingly. Maya has a gift for meeting students where they are and helping them grow from there. It's a rare quality in a teacher. As Tyler headed home, the three of them continued walking toward the main exit of the music building. The campus was peaceful in the evening light, with students crossing the courtyard on their way to dinner or study sessions. "Maya," Professor Williams said, "I wanted to talk to you about something. Dr. Reynolds and I have been discussing your future here at Riverside." Maya felt a familiar flutter of anxiety, though she tried to remind herself that conversations with Professor Williams no longer held the same tension they once had. "What do you mean?" she asked. "Well, you're scheduled to complete your degree next fall," Lisa said excitedly. "But Professor Williams thinks you should consider staying for graduate school." Professor Williams nodded. "Maya, your work with the undergraduate students has been exceptional. You have natural teaching instincts, and your musical knowledge is obviously at a very high level. I think you would thrive in our master's program." Maya considered this possibility. When she first arrived at Riverside, she had been focused only on getting through each day without revealing her background. The idea of planning a future here had seemed impossible. "I hadn't really thought about graduate school," Maya said honestly. "I've been so focused on just figuring out who I want to be as a musician, and have you?" Professor Williams asked gently. "Figured that out?" Maya paused, thinking about the question seriously. 6 months ago, she would have said she was confused about everything. But now, after months of teaching Tyler and other students, after rediscovering her joy in performance, after building genuine friendships with people who knew and accepted her whole story, she realized she did have an answer. "Yes, I think I have," she said. "I want to be someone who helps other people find their own relationship with music. I want to perform because I love it, not because I have to prove anything. And I want to keep learning even though I already know a lot." "That sounds like the perfect foundation for graduate study," Professor Williams said with satisfaction. As they reached the main campus quad, Maya spotted Jessica and Rachel sitting on a bench near the fountain, books spread around them as they studied together. When they saw Maya approaching, they waved her over. "Study break time?" Jessica called out. "We've been working on music theory homework for hours." Maya sat down with them, Lisa and Professor Williams continuing on their way. After saying goodbye, the evening air was cool but comfortable, and the campus was beautiful in the soft light of the setting sun. "How's your composition project going?" Maya asked Rachel, who was working on an original piece for her theory class. "It's getting better," Rachel said, showing Maya her handwritten score. "I've been thinking about what you said about letting the melody breathe, and I think it's helping." Maya looked over Rachel's work, impressed by her creativity and growth. When they first met, Rachel had been intimidated by music theory and convinced she wasn't creative enough to compose. Now she was writing music that was genuinely expressive and personal. "This is really beautiful," Maya said sincerely. I love how you're using silence here to create tension. I never thought about silence as part of the music until you mentioned it, Rachel said. It's funny how one comment can change everything. As they continued talking about Rachel's composition, Maya realized how much she had grown to love these informal teaching moments. Whether it was helping Tyler with his piano technique, discussing theory concepts with Rachel, or just listening to Lisa practice violin, she found deep satisfaction in being part of other people's musical journeys. Maya, Jessica said suddenly. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you ever regret leaving the conservatory? I mean, you were probably on track to have a major performing career, and now you're here helping us with basic stuff. Maya considered the question carefully. It was something she had asked herself many times, especially in the early days after her revelation. No, she said finally. I don't regret it at all. At the conservatory, I was so focused on being better than everyone else that I forgot why I wanted to play music in the first place. Here, I've remembered that music is about connection and joy, not just technical perfection. But don't you miss performing at a high level? Rachel asked. I still perform at a high level, Maya said with a smile. Just this weekend, I'm giving a solo recital in the city. The difference is that now I'm performing because I want to share something beautiful, not because I'm trying to prove I'm the best. This was true. Maya had started accepting performance opportunities again, but she was careful to choose engagements that felt meaningful rather than competitive. She had played at local nursing homes, community centers, and small concert venues. Each performance reminded her of why she had fallen in love with piano as a child. That's amazing, Jessica said. And you're still teaching us too. How do you balance it all? It doesn't feel like balancing, Maya said. Everything feeds into everything else. Teaching makes me a better performer because it reminds me to think about the music from the audience's perspective. Performing makes me a better teacher because I stay connected to the emotional power of music. And being here at Riverside with all of you reminds me that music is about community, not just individual achievement. As the evening grew darker, more students began heading back to their dorms. Maya gathered her things and prepared to leave as well, but she felt reluctant to end the conversation. These moments with her friends and students had become the highlight of her days. Maya, Rachel said as they were packing up, I just wanted to say thank you. Not just for helping with music stuff, but for being so honest about your story. It's made me realize that it's okay to be wherever you are in your journey. Yeah, Jessica agreed. When you first told us about the conservatory, I thought it meant you were too advanced to be our friend.